After watching all these videos, you're probably this probably looks like a nice scene, right? A little change of pace, right? Everybody needs a vacation. So in this video, I wanted to demonstrate how to do a feasibility analysis study to compare different options for project alternatives. And instead of using an IS project, an information systems project, instead I'm going to use the example of a vacation. So I think most of us are familiar with the idea of going on vacation, and most of us, when we think about going to a resort for a vacation, we think of something like this photograph, right? We think of a nice beach resort that maybe has a pool and some nice amenities and so forth. And that's a typical example. You might have a beach hotel, and the business model for a beach hotel is you have a whole bunch of rooms, and depending on how many rooms you have, you hope to sell as many as you can. So you got all these vacationers that are going to stay in this hotel, right? So pretty much anybody could be in any room at any given time, and you just fill up the hotel as much as you can to sell your rooms and to get your return on the investment of your hotel. As a traveler, though, a lot of the risk of a vacation rental lies with the property owner, right? Because as the vacationer, I just pay a fee to use it for a finite period of time. When I'm done using that hotel room, that's it. I'm done. I go off and I never go. I never see the place again. Who cares? But there's this somebody came up with this idea that instead of renting rooms or renting villas or whatever you want to call them in a hotel or a beach resort, for example, instead they thought, what if we can just capture all of our revenue up front at a fixed rate, and call it a timeshare? So basically, what they did is they built these hotels that, instead of just renting the rooms at market value at any given time and hoping to fill those rooms, they transfer the risk to the traveler, and they say, listen, we're going to sell you ownership of our beach resort, but you don't have to buy the whole resort. You only have to buy 16% of it, right? So maybe it's a single room. They say, we have this one room in our hotel, and that room we think is worth $100,000. And they'll sell that $100,000 room to six people for $16,000 a piece. And of course, pocket the little bit of extra profit that they're going to make, right? So they're going to make a little bit of profit on that, but they're going to sell the room to six vacationers at $16,000 a piece, 16% per vacationer, and they basically can use that room 1/6 of the time, right? So then six of us basically would share the same room, but we each pick different weeks that we go on vacation, right? So each of us can pick a 2 month period of time that we own that room. Now, of course, usually timeshares they sell far more of them, right? More shares, so that everybody gets maybe 2 weeks of time. But for our simple example, that's how basically how a timeshare works. And of course, what they're doing here is they're shifting the risk of selling those rooms. They're shifting the risk to the consumer, to the traveler, because you may not always be able to use your weeks every year. You may not always be able to go on vacation. Plus, you're locked into that property. So you're always guaranteed a vacation at the same place, but you may not always want to go to that place, right? It's no longer a vacation if you're there, a couple times a year. So, one of the other cool things they came up with timeshares is to try to sell these things because of some of those issues that people have with them. They came up with this idea that if somebody else owns another timeshare somewhere else, so let's say you have a friend that owns 16% at a mountain resort somewhere, right? So you got a beach resort that you own, they have a mountain resort. Maybe every once in a while you guys can switch, right? You can trade. And so they created these marketplaces where companies that own these timeshare companies will allow people to trade their vacations with other people, right? So that's the basic idea of how these timeshares work. So I'm using this as an anecdote because years ago, my wife and I had to go. We wanted to go on vacation, and uh, the way these timeshares sell these vacations is they basically put you up for free in their resort for a couple of days. But in exchange for you staying there, not even for free, like I think they charged us $90 a night or something like that, which really isn't that expensive, right? $90 a night at a nice resort, 90 US dollars. That's about normal, right? That's average for a beach resort in the United States, in Florida or California or Hawaii or something like that. So they basically charge you, about half price. They let you stay there. but you have to go and attend a sales pitch, right? So you have to go and sit through this sales pitch where they try to sell you on purchasing a property in the resort. And I remember, sitting in this through this time pitch, and they charge a lot of money for these timeshares, but they're trying to convince you that it's a better value than staying in hotels, right? So most of us stay in hotels. And by the way, this picture is not me, but I just found a random picture on the internet of a high pressure sales pitch for a timeshare. But typically, when you sit down in these, they're trying to convince you to spend thousands and thousands of dollars more than maybe you want to spend because you're going to own this piece of the property and you'll be able to resell it, and you'll be able to stay anywhere you want where there's other timeshares because you can trade them like I showed you previously, right? So you could go and trade your beach resort for, say, a mountain resort. So they're going to convince you of all that. Now, usually when you think of places that you can trade a resort, you think of places that people would normally go on vacation. So here's my wife and I sitting in this high pressure sales pitch, and the salesman is trying to convince us to buy it. And he says, now I have to preface this, that about 2 or 3 weeks before we went on this trip, we didn't realize that we were going to have to sit through this high pressure sales pitch. And about 2 to 3 weeks before the trip, we had watched a special on TV about Chernobyl, where the nuclear power plant melted down over in Russia. And we watched this special about Chernobyl, and one of the cool things we saw was that the wolves started coming back into Chernobyl. And there's some radioactivity in these wolves, but it was fascinating to us that that these wild animals are surviving where they thought for thousands of years no one would be able to live here. So we were fascinated by that. We were both talking about it just a couple days before. So we're sitting in the sales pitch, and the sales guy says, "Look, if you could stay anywhere on your vacation, you go anywhere you want. We're selling you the ability to do anything you want for your vacation, and we have all of these locations that you can pick from for your timeshare. Even though we're locking you into our property, theoretically you could trade with one of these other 45 properties in some great destinations. So just they're trying to get us to think of our ideal vacation destination, and they're going to tell us about how they have a property there. So they say, well, what's your ideal vacation? And of course, they're thinking that we're going to say something like this, right? Like this big resort hotel. But we, without even talking to each other, we looked at each other and, we knew we wanted to get out of the sales pitch. So we both said Chernobyl, right? We just want to go to Chernobyl, which is absurd. So, of course, it got us out of that high-pitched sales pitch. But every time they were telling us how much it would cost, I kept trying to do this feasibility analysis in my head. I'm trying to figure out, is it really worth the money and all the other factors that go along with staying in a timeshare? So if I were to objectively make a decision, now of course the whole goal of these sales pitches is they want you to forget about logic. They want you to forget about the real world. They're trying to get you to buy their timeshare. So they want you to suspend logic while they're doing that, right? So the first step, if we're going to do an objective analysis to decide whether or not a timeshare is going to be right for us, so the first thing I want to do is do a financial feasibility analysis. I want to compare staying in a hotel every year versus staying in a timeshare, right? Which one is more financially reasonable? Now, to do that, so the way these sales guys work is they don't consider the time value of money. That's the first thing. So the time value of money goes out the window because what they do is they say, look, we're going to sell you this timeshare for $20,000 or $19,000, right? $19,000, but you're going to make that back because of all the money you're going to save from hotels over time. And well, what they don't tell you is that, number one, who has $20,000 to spend, when you're sitting at that table with the sales guy? You don't. So of course you're going to have to finance it. When you finance, that means you're actually paying more than $20,000, right? And not only that, but the value of that property in the future is going down, right? That value, that $20,000 investment is really kind of going down for us with a timeshare because it really doesn't have any resale value, right? But they try to convince you otherwise, but really, it doesn't have that kind of value for us. Not like if you buy, it's more like buying a car where it depreciates and less like buying a property. So that's one problem. So anyway, let's say I had a spreadsheet like this that lets me use the time value of money to calculate the value of this timeshare. Now let's pretend that this timeshare is going to give us, I don't know, let's say they're going to give us 2 weeks. So I went on Marriott.com and I looked up a Residence Inn. So a hotel room that has a kitchen and a bedroom and a couch and some basic amenities. The normal amenities you would expect on a vacation. And I picked that hotel brand because Marriotts are all over the world. Anywhere you go, there's always a Marriott somewhere, and they're all pretty reasonably priced. I think the average price in the United States for a suite hotel is $212 a night, including taxes and fees and everything else. So let's assume that we're going to go on vacation for 2 weeks per year. Now, of course, most of us don't go on vacation for 2 weeks a year, but let's pretend that we did. So that's $2,968 per year is my benefit. So $2,968 per year. That's how much money I'm going to save, right? That's my savings. So I'm going to copy that over for 20 years. So I'm going to save that much for 20 years. By year 20, that means that I have saved myself $28,236 in 20 years, right? Not bad. That's a lot of money to save. So if they're selling me a property for $17,000 or $19,000, now here's the thing. If we're going to buy a property for $19,000, we're probably going to give them $1,000 down payment, right? So that's $18,000. So let's put in our initial cost of $1,000. Now the problem is it's not just $1,000 because you also have to pay maintenance fees on these properties. That's how they get you. So the average maintenance cost on these properties on a timeshare in the United States is $660 per year. So my first year, I'm going to spend $1,660. $1,000 is going to be my down payment. $660 is going to be my maintenance fee. Now, for the rest of the year, so let's say I'm going to get a loan, right? Because I can't afford this up front. So at 7.5% interest for a 60-month loan, right? A 5-year loan, I'm going to pay $360 per month. Right, so let me drag this back over. So that's going to cost me a 7.5% interest. That's going to be $360.68 per month, 12 months in a year. Plus that $660 yearly maintenance fee is $49.88.16. So let's fill that in here. So I'm going to do $49.88. Oops, I have to put a minus sign in front of this. $49.88.16. And I'm going to do that every year until year 5, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 years of those payments. And then after that, my maintenance fees kick in. So then I just have to pay the maintenance fees every year thereafter. So I'm going to put the maintenance fee in here. All right, now accounting for the time value of money. With a traditional hotel room, I'm going to spend $28,236.26. That's not so bad, right? I'm saving a pretty good amount of money, and I'm only going to end up spending. So the value to me of that timeshare that we just talked about, my value right now is $23,686, based on the fact that I have to spend $660 per year, plus that 5 years of payments. That 5 years of payments includes 7.5% interest, but I'm subtracting my discount rate for its value to me today, right? So it's the net present value today, which means that if I were to sign that contract today to buy those vacation weeks up front today, then the return on investment is 0.19. That means that I am going to end up in 20 years. If I keep this property for 20 years, I'm going to make some money. That's not so bad. But the average timeshare owner only keeps the property for 10 years, right? So here's my 10-year mark. So at 20 years, sure, I've saved money, right? I've saved a little bit of money, $4,550. That's all I saved at year 10, which is almost breaking even when you think about it. Down here at year 10, I really haven't saved much at all. In fact, I've spent more money on this timeshare than I would have if I just stayed in hotels every year. So really, to me, this is almost breaks even. At the 10-year mark, it barely breaks even. Here I'm still spending a little more, and I barely break even out here at the 20-year mark. So this is a financial analysis taking into account the time value of money. So what I did is I calculated what my benefit was every year. So how much extra money am I getting every year, right? Independent of all other factors. If I do this project, how much more money am I going to have every year? That's part one. Then down here, I calculated my one-time cost, and then my costs for each year thereafter. Now, normally with an information systems project, we're going to stop at year 5. But for this project, I went all the way out to year 20 because the timeshare salesman told me that you're gonna keep it for 20 years. That's they claim that that's how long you should be able to keep this timeshare. But I'm going to say 10 years because I think most people probably only keep them 10 years. Um, the discount rate I used was 10%. Typically discount rates are assigned by accounting departments, right? So they come up with what the depreciation rates are and the interest rates and things like that. They take all that into consideration. They come up with the discount rate. So in any event, I also have down here my break-even point. So my break-even point is at, according to this analysis, it looks like my break-even point is going to be somewhere around, where is it? It's going to be in year 1.7, which seems a little low to me. I feel like my break-even point really should be right out here somewhere. Yes, my break-even point is actually going to be out here, right? Because here is where I've both spent and received about the same amount of money in year 11. So year 11 is really my break-even point. All right, so this is just not calculating right because I have my break-even calculations on a 5-year horizon. I should have extended this out all the way to 20 years, and then I would have a more accurate number on the break-even point. So in any event, but I can tell just by looking at these numbers where the break-even point is, where these two numbers are roughly equal. That's my break-even point. So that's my financial analysis. Now, the next step, I'm not done yet, right? Because this is just part 1. Now I want to make a chart that compares some of these different options. So I'm going to basically come up with some factors that for me, these are the factors. So first of all, I'm going to list down the left-hand side. Basically down here on the left, I'm going to put my 2 alternatives, right? I've got 2 alternatives. I could stay in a hotel or I can buy a timeshare every year, right? I could buy a timeshare for the next 20 years, or I can stay at different hotels anywhere I want for the next 20 years and just pay the market rate. So there are some factors that I have to take into consideration to decide which of these is the better option for me. So I came up with these factors. So these are all of my factors. I have financial, the financial feasibility of doing this, the flexibility of having a hotel room versus a timeshare, what kinds of amenities are available, the proximity to attractions. Do they have, what's the room service options in comparison? Can I bring my dog with me? And do they have customer service, right? Or how good is the customer service? And all of that can be measured. Now, all of that is not weighed equally. I have different weights for these, right? So let's put my weights in here. So I'm going to say financial is about 1/5 of my decision. Flexibility is 1/4 of my decision. That's the most important thing to me is the flexibility, right? So that's my most important thing. The amenities are not as important. Proximity to the attractions are somewhat important, as important to me as the amenities, but these two are more important. Obviously, I have to afford it. I want to make sure it's flexible for my schedule. What kind of room service do they have compared to each other? Can I bring my dog or not? Is only 10%, right? If I can't bring the dog, that's okay. Sometimes it's more trouble than it's worth to bring your dog with you on vacation. You got to feed it, you got to take it for walks, right? As opposed to just leaving it in a kennel. And then customer service, we're going to go with 5% on customer service. Timeshares are not very well known for the customer service, so I do want to account for that a little bit. So this needs to be a weighted average, not a standard average. So we're going to do this. I'm going to first, just to make sure we have a sum of 100%. Usually when I do these, I'll put a, oops, I did not mean to do this. Oops, I lost Excel here for a second. All right, so I put in my equation. So I have the sum of B2 through H2 is 100%, so I'm good there. Now I have to put in my an equation for the weighted average. So let me do that real quick. All right, so there's my weighted average calculation. So B3 times B2 plus C3 times C2 plus D3 times D2 plus E3 times E2 and so forth, right? And I use the dollar sign so it locks it into this. That way, when I copy this to the cell below it, it's going to be the same weight's going to be used. It's not going to shift around on me. So now let me put some numbers in here. So let's see. Financially, I would say that staying at a hotel is about a 3.5, and staying in and buying a timeshare is going to be a 4.8. So buying a timeshare is, by the way, I'm going to use a scale from 0 to 5. So I'm going to rank each one of these. I'm going to rank each of these factors, each of these alternatives on a scale of 0 to 5. So I'm ranking a hotel at a 3.5 and a timeshare at 4.8. Now, as far as flexibility goes, staying in a hotel is pretty flexible. Sometimes you can't get a room in certain times of the year, but so you run that risk. But other than that, it's pretty flexible. If you can't get a room in one town, then just go stay at a different place, right? Go to a different beach. And as far as a timeshare, the flexibility, you have a little bit of flexibility because you can trade timeshares, but it's not as good as a hotel. So I'm going to rank it at about half, at 2.5 of 5. As far as amenities go, I would say they're both about equal. They kind of have the same stuff. They're designed to be sort of like hotels, so I'm going to rank them both at 2.5. Now, proximity to attractions. So a hotel, I'm going to say is a 2.8 because sometimes you got to stay kind of far away, and timeshares are usually right there. They're usually kind of pretty close to the attraction, so I'll give them a better rating on that one. As far as room service goes, when you stay in a hotel, room service is pretty much every day, right? At least once a day they're going to come in and make your beds, you sweep the floors, all the normal stuff they do in hotels. But in a timeshare, they only do that at the beginning and the end, right? The rest of the time you're kind of responsible for that stuff. But you can call and request service if you need it, but I think they charge a small fee for that. So I'll rank them a 2 on the room service. It's nice when you're on vacation and not have to worry about all that stuff, right? So I want to put that in my ranking. As far as being able to bring the dog, I'd say at a hotel it's a 2.1 because you can bring the dog, but they charge a fee. And in a timeshare, you can bring the dog, and it's a much lower fee. So they're much more amenable to bringing pets. They just assign you to a timeshare unit that the other owners also bring pets, right? So they don't have to worry so much about somebody being allergic or something along those lines. So definitely a better rating on the pet factor. And as far as customer service goes, hotels usually have pretty good customer service, whereas a timeshare, if I had to hazard a guess, a timeshare is not going to have great customer service. So I'm going to rank them about half on customer service. All right, so now I have objectively entered my ranking of each of these alternatives. So I'm sitting there with a salesman, and he's telling me how much better this option is for a timeshare. Now I have an objective measure of how these compare. And I could say to the sales guy, look, financially, you're better. You're better ranked than them. But flexibility, clearly a hotel is better flexibility-wise. I can defend each one of these assessments that I've made here. I can defend all of these. And because I can defend all of these, and I know that each one of these categories is accurate, I know that these rankings are accurate, the weighted averages. So according to my objective decision, staying at a hotel is ranked a 3.5, and a timeshare is 3.33. So hotel wins it by a hair. So that means I should not buy a timeshare. I should continue staying in hotels when I go on vacation. And I've made this decision objectively. I can defend every part of this decision. If you want to know how I came up with the financial feasibility, I can show you the chart and say, look, here's how I came up with it. This is how I can defend what I want to do. Flexibility. I could define why I assigned a 4.5 versus a 2.5, right? And a lot of times when you're doing a baseline project plan, a lot of what you're doing, the baseline project plan kind of hinges around this feasibility analysis where you're showing all of these weights on all of these factors as kind of the main part, up top on the document. But you might have an appendix that backs up each one of those claims. So you might have an appendix that describes the operational feasibility issues. You might have an appendix that describes each alternative's technical feasibility issues and why you ranked each one the way you did. And you can even sub-rank them within the technical feasibility. Say the overall score is this because of all these different factors that we took into account. So you can get very granular. But the bottom line is you should be able to look at a feasibility analysis, and the feasibility analysis should be able to defend the decision that was made as to which alternative was chosen early in the project based on some objective measure, and this is just one way to objectively measure that. Now, of course, my categories here are geared towards going on vacation, but an information systems project, here you would have your operational feasibility, your technical feasibility, the financial feasibility ranking, political feasibility, all the different feasibilities we talked about, whichever ones are important to you. and you would come up with what those rankings are as far as the percentages. And again, that's something that you could document and you can defend. Um, I don't know if we talked about RFPs or requests for proposals, but sometimes it's important to do this to reduce your liability when you're doing a request for proposal, because all these responses that you get, you can rank them this way. That way you can defend your decision to purchase from one vendor versus another. That could either be because through, if you're a publicly traded company or something like that, they may have access to your decision process, and they may make the case that you were skewed towards another vendor for unethical reasons, such as kickbacks and pay for play and things like that. All right, so that's the basic idea of doing feasibility analysis, and I also gave you kind of a background on how to use this spreadsheet, which my default spreadsheet, if you have a copy of mine, only goes to week 5, which is perfectly fine for an information systems project, but you could always extend this longer for other types of projects.